Hi, my name is Natasha. I am a PhD student at the University of Oxford, and I wanted to make this video because I'm aware that it's interview season, and I remember I felt incredibly intimidated and scared at the prospect of having an interview. And I did 3 interviews. I interviewed for UCL, failed. I interviewed for Imperial, failed. And then I interviewed for Oxford and I was successful. So having been through that experience and being incredibly appreciative of the help I got from PhD students in older years, I thought I would make this video as my informal take and what I wish I'd known before the interview process last year, sort of help you feel a little bit better about your interview. So let's dive into it. The first thing I would say to someone who is currently in the interview process for a PhD is that the people interviewing you are on your side. They are not there to criticize you. They are not there to grill you in any way. They are impressed by your application and now they want to meet you. They're already intrigued and you've already made a positive impression on your panel. The reason this is important is because your application can prove that you are good at achieving. What the interview wants to assess is that you enjoy achieving those things. I think unfortunately it's possible to have an outstanding resume, but to not have been intellectually engaged while you were achieving the things you list on your resume. So the goal of an interview is to see that you actually understand and you enjoyed the things in your CV, application, personal statement. The way I would informally describe an interview is that an interview is sort of a formal vibe check where the questions are excuses for a discussion. That being said, the thing that's being assessed continuously in an interview is that you are capable of preparing for a high stakes meeting, such as an interview. While simultaneously, they will try to catch you out at some point and give you a question that you didn't expect. And what they're trying to see there is if they've seen preparation in, say, 5 out of 7 questions, then those 2 questions that you weren't expecting are there in order to assess how you can problem solve, how you deal with something you don't necessarily know or are not prepared for under pressure. And what they value there more is your approach to the question as opposed to the answer in and of itself. In other words, if you're scared of being caught out by a question you didn't expect, know that you are supposed to feel caught out by 10 or 20% of your interview questions because they want to see how you will react. It's not a bad thing to not be as comfortable with a specific interview question. It can actually be a really good thing because it gives you the opportunity to show a character trait, i.e. how you deal with a problem or how you deal with being put on the spot. When you're interviewing for a funded PhD position, you are pitching yourself to a panel of academics that are trying to assess whether you are, for lack of a better word, worth the investment. If you secure that position, you will have access to 4 years of funding, and they want to make sure that you will not only complete a project because it's incredibly difficult for them to replace you, but also enjoy completing it and do well. And that is a lot of pressure for a half an hour interview. But ways that you can alleviate that pressure and you can help that panel decide, as well as make yourself feel better, is you can prepare in the following ways. Questions that I can guarantee will come up during a PhD interview will be, why do you want to do a PhD? Why this PhD? Why this program? Because they want to know that you have done the sort of inner work to decide that this is ultimately the path you want to go down and you're not feeling pressured by external pressures to apply to a PhD. If you want to know more about whether you should apply to a PhD, feel free to watch my video on this where I talk about how that self-reflection looked like for me in preparation for this specific PhD program. The interviewers are looking for someone that is willing to commit to a project that for a lot of the time is not going to work out. So you need to have a good idea in yourself of if and why a PhD is the right next step for you. Something I found really useful by my third interview was when I was asked a question, I took maybe a few seconds to think about what the question is really asking. For example, a question like, why do you want to be part of a CDT, which is quite a standard CDT question, is on one hand assessing that you've prepared and you know what a CDT program is. But on the other hand, it's also assessing that you are a team player and you care about teamwork and you're a social person and you like working with other people. In my opinion, if you have the opportunity to make a presentation, especially if your interview is online, take that opportunity. A presentation gives you a structure to the beginning of your interview. It gives you the ability to show that you understand concepts and are good at storytelling, but also it gives you a sort of factor of familiarity during the interview because there is something that you have practiced. You can't necessarily prepare for the questions that they're going to ask you, but you can definitely practice your presentation. And I think the benefit that has on your mindset during your interview is extremely valuable. In terms of showcasing your skills, I would say that show, don't tell is a way better approach. So in your presentation, if you have the opportunity to describe your project, when you are explaining something you did, it's good to have building blocks within your own slide of the skills you obtained. I thought I would show you an example interview presentation framework that you can implement when preparing for your interview. The first thing you're going to want to do is to give your panel a brief overview of your background, just to reintroduce yourself. I think a timeline is a great way of doing this. So you can have your bachelor's degree, an internship or some work experience you obtained during your bachelor's degree, your final year project, the grade you got, whether you graduated with an upper second class or first class degree. The reason the final year project is highlighted in this slide is because that is the project I will be talking about in this presentation. So when you're asked to present work, you can refer to the work you're going to present in your timeline so that it gives your interviewers a good idea of when exactly you did this work. And then you can also talk about your master's if you're doing one. Here in this upper right corner, you can have a picture of yourself or a relevant cartoon referring to what you're talking about, a meme if you really want to go all out, but this is a very basic framework. And if there is a way that you can make it more creative, then you should totally go for it. This is just to provide you with a foundation that you can build on for when you describe your own candidate background. Now I'm going to spend 2 minutes giving you some tips on how to present your work in a way that is going to impress the panel. The project I presented was some work I did on light activated microbial growth for chemical biotechnology. So I've got my title here and a summary figure of what the project was about. Then the first thing you want to do is provide background to your project because the interview panel will likely not be familiar with the work you were doing. I think this is quite an effective template where you have a figure, you have your title, you have an indicator that this is the background, and you also have your presentation time frame. So for example, my first introductory concept was controlling microbial growth for chemical biotechnology and why it's important. And I explained this figure that I made myself through BioRender. Now, as you go through your background concept, your timeline moves forward whilst simultaneously keeping an indicator of which part of the project you're talking about. This is a good way to keep your panel engaged and show you're good at organizing your slides whilst not actually have to spend any time talking about these things, so you can focus on describing your figures and the concepts you're explaining. So the idea is you keep going all the way to your project aims. Then when you describe your results, a good tip I have is that you also have some building blocks on the skills you obtained through the results you got. So for example, if I was going to synthesize aspirin, I would have the synthesis, I would show the NMR spectrum I obtained, and I would show the TLC. But the important thing here is I'm also simultaneously telling my panel that through getting these results and through going through this process, I obtained skills in chemical synthesis, product characterization, and NMR. Then the idea is that as you go through your results, your skill building blocks also increase. Ultimately, your aim is that by your conclusion, you have a high tower of skills that you've obtained that you haven't had to explicitly mention, but you've shown your panel in a very effective way. Bottom line, during your interview, you want to hit all the check boxes that the interview panel is looking for, but you want to do that in a way that is not generic and that is authentic to you, to ensure that you are both impressing the interview panel, but you're also filtering out a program that might not necessarily be for you. I hope that helps. I think being invited to interview is an incredible achievement. Best of luck in your interview.